Hi, everyone. Barry McGuire here. It's Thursday, so it must be live at 5. Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. And today we're going to talk about, the one big one. The one big one. We've got Andrea Workington and Neil Taniguchi and Wayne Hillier and me, and we're going to talk about creative real estate, and it's a chance for you to ask any kind of question you want. So it's certainly all the Q&A that you've got, but we're going to start out with talking about creative real estate education, and how it is and how it seems for Andrea and for Neil, and maybe Wayne's going to chip in as well. And we're gonna see if we can come up with the one big one that each of us have experienced. A big win, a big question that maybe is giving you heartburn, a big issue that you've had to overcome or you have not yet overcome, and you want to discuss that. For the three of us as well. I mean, we'll talk about those things from our particular perspectives. So it's the one big one, whatever big thing is biting your butt. And then general Q&A. Certainly you can ask me all the legal questions you want. You can ask Andrea and Neil all of the very practical, down in the trenches, what would you do as an experienced creative investor kinds of questions. So we're going to do all of that. And so Wayne, let's bring in Andrea and Neil, and we're going to get this puppy started. Oh, there they are, just like that. Wow. And Wayne. Wayne, are you actually in the cabin, or is that just your background? That's it.
I am in the cabin. Sorry.
Wow. Nice.
Very nice. It looks fake, eh?
Well, I mean, it's so beautiful that it could easily be fake.
Turn around, throw a brick through the window. Prove to us it's real.
Yeah, show us, Wayne. Show us. All right. Well, listen, you guys. Thanks for showing up. I know everyone's busy, and I appreciate everyone popping in here and giving us roughly an hour of your time to talk about creative real estate, which, it's not really that much of a trial, is it? I mean, what do we like talking about? I love talking about creative real estate. I never get tired of doing that. So the theme of today is, the one big one, the big question, the big issue, the big problem, the big win, something big that's happened for you. It can be anytime. It doesn't have to be happened in the last week, but something in the last while, maybe, that you think's interesting. Maybe you got a couple. Neil, why don't we start with you? What have you got that's kind of big that you'd like to share that you think people might be interested in?
Well, I hinted at it yesterday in the comments on the event, so I'll before I forget, I'll maybe throw this one in there. It may not be the biggest thing going on right now. We had an RTDRS hearing this week. So I said, unfortunately, we gleaned a nugget. And so the unfortunately is we had to go to RTDRS. The fortunately was this, though, that it was a rent-to-own tenancy, and the tenant showed up and said the words rent-to-own, and Janelle, who is our property manager, was ready, shall we say, for it. And she said to the adjudicator, yes, but. And we have a lease agreement with this particular individual, with these folks, that is a lease agreement, and they have a completely separate document that gives them an option to purchase on the house. And we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the fact that they are delinquent in rent and have not paid. And the adjudicator accepted it. So I know that in part of the teachings, we have said, be aware that sometimes RTDRS may not want to have hear these types of eviction hearings when it is rent-to-own involved, because they say we have no jurisdiction over rent-to-own, only with Residential Tenancy Act. And again, for you folks across the country, this is Alberta-based stuff. Your mileage may vary, as they say in other provinces, but certainly there's precedent, which doesn't always work at DRS, but certainly there is, the bottom line is the adjudicator listened and did toss out his objection to the fact that it was a rent to own and listened only on the merits of major breach, and we got an unconditional order. And he had already vacated, so it was really just a lock-in that he owes us the balance of the month that he hadn't paid, and a 60-day window to file for future damages on the move-out inspection. Is that Donna that just ducked down behind there?
Well, yes. You know, that, I think that is very big. I think it's very big. So, so yes, we are Alberta-based, and tenancy disputes go to what Neil referred to as the RTDRS. And Neil, what does that stand for? What is the?
Yes, sorry, no acronyms. RTDRS is Residential Tenancy Dispute Resolution S. I'm going to say a system, and essentially it's a parallel process. Instead of having to make application to the courts to try and keep them from being clogged up, you submit for binding arbitration through this process, and it's fairly effective, and I find also fair. We've heard of tenants who, if they have a bad landlord, they win, and if you're a good landlord and your tenant is not following the rules, then you have a pretty good chance of success as well.
So as Neil said, mileage will vary depending on what province you're in. So you know, each province has their own way of settling tenant disputes. Lots of them have this kind of a board or tribunal, as opposed to going off to court to settle tenant disputes, but each province has their own different one. But I think there's a couple of key nuggets out of this. In our focus workshops, we do say that when you're doing a rent to own, it's a lease, that's the rent part, and there's an option, that's the own part, you get a chance to buy. And we teach that you should keep those two documents separate. Because, I mean, there are lots of folks who teach you put the whole lease and the option all in one document, and that's convenient and it works nicely. We like to keep it separate, and I think that ties very nicely into what your property manager was able to say. Listen, we're here on the lease part of this. There is an option, but that is a completely separate issue and a completely separate document. We're here to talk about the lease. They're delinquent in their rent, and that's all we're here about. So, you know, it would have been tougher, I think, if it was all in one document. So great that you have them separated out. And the second thing is that these kinds of dispute resolution systems or tribunals, I think you get variable results depending on who's hearing the matter. So there's not just one person who runs a tribunal or the RTDRS. There's lots of hearing officers or people who run tribunals. And so had it been someone who's got more of a tenant sympathetic streak, although they of course would never say that, it could have been a different result. But this is the best result that you could have hoped for in a rent-to-own situation where you're going to court or you're going to the tribunal or the board and saying, listen, they haven't paid their rent and we want to deal with that, and not have them toss you out and up into the Court of Queen's Bench because there's an RTO aspect and an option involved. So that is a really good result. And I think it is one other thing I think we should emphasize here. I've heard it from lots of people who have to go off to the RTDRS or your local tribunal, and that is that paper is paramount. You need to be able to show up, and everybody has their story to tell. Everybody has their story, but you need to be able to show up with paper and facts and figures that you can show the adjudicator or a tribunal person, board member, to be able to prove your side of it. The he said, she said doesn't really work very well. People who has good paper has a much better chance of winning, I think. Andrew, do you have any comments on that process or your experience in having to deal with what Neil had to deal with?
Not the exact same scenario. I have been to court over one rent-own client, a bit of a different situation. Do you want me to talk
well,
about
yeah, I
that
think so
now,
because it does come up. Not that often. If you've only in all RTOs you've done, you've only had to do this once. But I think it fits nicely with what Neil is saying and with the peripheral comments that I was making. So yeah, let's hear about it.
So this is about 3 years ago. A realtor brought us a client, and the client had already chosen the house. These folks had 5% down, and they'd already been to see the mortgage broker and everything. So for them, it wasn't a credit issue per se in terms of bad credit. It's just they had too high of a total debt service ratio. So they needed some time to pay that down. So they chose a house that had a reduced price for what the neighborhood was. And it was because it had some deferred maintenance. And so these folks were quite willing to take that on. And we saw value that if we got the house back, we could still make a profit on it. So they went ahead, did the home inspection, paid for the home inspection. They gave the realtor $5,000. And then I found an investor, a money person, who would put in the rest of the down payment and would qualify for the mortgage. 2 days after we removed conditions, the rent-to-own clients changed their mind and said, we don't want to buy this house anymore. And they demanded their deposit back. Well, we hadn't even closed yet on the property. And the $5,000 was held in trust at the listing realtor's trust account. And so we had to go through with the purchase, and I was able to find another rent-to-own client within 6 weeks, thank goodness. And so we still made it into a win, but it wasn't originally how we thought we were going to do this, right? Because now my money investor had to come up with more money. So, so one learning point before I continue the story is I would have, if somebody had 5% down in that same scenario, I would take it all up front as a non-refundable deposit because upon condition removal. So the day that we remove conditions, I want that 5% because I want them now committed to it. So to make a very long story short, the clients were very unhappy that they were not getting their $5,000 back. And they hounded and hounded the realtor. They would show up at her open houses, the husband would, and be very belligerent, lots of racial slurs. And so it got to the point where the realtor had to call the RCMP and get a restraining order. So then this person decided to self-represent, but they had a lawyer write up like a demand letter and all this kind of stuff. So the rent-to-own client didn't understand that the beneficiary of that $5,000 was not the realtor, it was us. And so it took them like over a year to figure that out. And so what actually happened is the realtor used their realtor insurance and to bring in the realtor represented lawyer under RECA. And that lawyer figured out that we were the beneficiaries actually, and he named us as a third party. So talk about, hello, thank you very much. But anyhow, it is what it is. And I wasn't on title, but my joint venture partner was. And so he gets this random letter and he's like, what is going on? Because we had no idea the realtor was going through this whole situation. She never mentioned it to us. So we had no clue. So I'm not a lawyer, but I knew enough to kind of follow the format. So I did the first kind of reply back, because we're in provincial court, right? So you can self-represent. So I just acted as an agent to just do the initial reply, but we actually had a court trial date. So we had to hire a lawyer to represent us. And so because he was the applicant, the rent-to-own client, he got to go first, and he, like I mentioned, self-represented. And then we took a break for lunch, and when we came back, the judge dismissed it. The guy hadn't proved anything. So, you know, yes, we gained $5,000, but we also paid $5,000 in legal fees. So, you know, we felt vindicated that we hadn't done anything wrong. And that was good. But you just don't know when you're going to be sued when someone's not happy. So I would have to say that I thought it was a good learning experience, because even though the realtor's lawyer was the one that actually named us as a third party, I mean, the realtor and I are still good friends. Like, I understand their position. I understand that they had to point out to this person that they weren't the beneficiary of this $5,000. So I get all of that. There's no issue with that. But, you know, if you're going to do a tenant first model, which is what we did, I would highly recommend the day that you're going to remove conditions, make sure you've got that full deposit up front. Because I think if we had had their full $18,000 up front, maybe they would not have walked away so quickly. And I don't think that they were honest as to why they walked away. So I think maybe he lost a job. And if that was the case, maybe we would have felt like, oh, you lost your job. I understand why you can't go through this. You know, here's your money back. As soon as I find somebody else, I'll give you your money back. But no, it was just belligerent conversation. And I had one conversation with him that went sideways quick. And anyone who knows me knows I don't get upset. You know, I'm pretty calm. And so I didn't get upset. I just thought, I'm not dealing with this wingnut. So.
Well, that's, you know, there's certainly a couple of learning nuggets in there. If somebody has got option money to the tune of 5%, and in this case was $18,000, yeah, that's a powerful lever to have the $18,000 under your control before you move ahead with finalizing the purchase and the commitments by you and your money partner. Because yeah, 18, if you had 18,000 in your jeans, I guess they really would have fought for that, but still, you would have been better compensated, and it would have given you probably more room to maneuver. You might, if he had said, okay, well, you know, I've lost my job, so I really can't go through with it. You could have said, okay, all right, you've put up $18,000 worth of option money. We don't want to, you know, be too hard on you, so we'll give you back a sum of money. More room to negotiate, I think, if you have more money. So, you know, that's one part of it, I think. And I had another note in there to myself. Oh, yes. So, as Andrea pointed out, the dollar figure at stake was $5,000, and the judge dismissed the case, so the $5,000 remains, but you paid $5,000 to your lawyer and to settle it. And so, folks, when people say to me, "I want to sue," gall darn it, I'm gonna sue, and that's how we're gonna handle things. I always say to them that litigation is it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's stressful, it's not guaranteed. And even when you win, it just doesn't feel right. Andrea, in this case, won, but for all the time and effort and trouble and upset on any number of different fronts, it's just a big pain in the ass and almost never worth it. So that's my sort of side comment on litigation. Anyway,
I've never heard you say a swear word.
Wayne.
Did you say
Not swearing? No. So that was, I think that was a good add-on, Andrea. But moving back to you and your one big one, what have you thought about in what's going on in your real estate life that's a big issue or a big win or a big something or other that we'd like to hear about?
Yeah, so it's also actually rent-to-own related. And I had this fantastic couple 2 years ago enter into a rent-to-own contract in a mobile home park 55 plus. Now, these are modular homes, but the bank still considers it like a mobile home. So They had already talked to their banker. They knew exactly what they needed to do, and they did it. They improved their credit. They paid down their total debt service ratio because the gentleman had co-signed for some of his kids' car loans. So that's the only reason why they couldn't, qualify, as TDS R was too high again. Fantastic people. Can't say enough good things about them. In October, they talked to TD. TD Bank says, no problem, you're great candidates for a mortgage, but we need to get insurance because you're only 5% down. Well, there's two things wrong. One is age restriction, and two is mobile home park or rented land, leased land, essentially. It doesn't matter that it's mobile or modular, but leased land and 55 plus. Out of our 3 insurers in Canada, nobody will touch it because they'll do one but not the other. They won't do both. And so these folks are going to lose their deposit. They'll get a little bit back, but there's Sean Impey was fantastic. I can't say enough good things about Sean trying to help us come up with a solution for these folks. And we even, considered doing seller financing for them. So I talked to the owner because I just set up the rent to own for a gentleman that I was property managing for. So I'm not financially involved in the rent to own itself. I just set it out for him. And so, we thought, well, maybe he could give 15%. And so we ran that by TD Bank, and no, they still didn't like it. So unfortunately, when people say on a rent to own, oh, I've talked to my banker, I know exactly what I need to do, that's normally fine. And they did everything they needed to do. But now everyone needs to know age restricted and leased land does not work with less than 20% down. In some cases, banks want to see 30 to 35% down on leased land. And that's why TD turned it down. They just couldn't insure it. So that's a really sad, big one. And so I thought I'd share that experience.
Okay. So that is, that is certainly a different scenario. It's a modular home. It's on leased land. I mean, those rarely come up in my practice. I hardly ever see those. I don't know if you guys have seen many over your investing career, but they don't come up very much. But the part I hear in there is the folks said, we've talked to our banker, we've done or we have everything we need. I'm guessing in there they didn't have a formal, unconditional commitment from their bank. How did that part of knowing about their financing work?
Well, so the gentleman had been dealing with TD for forever, for always. And I think the key is that they didn't say to TD Bank, the place that I'm doing a rent to own on is both age restricted and leased land. Right. I think that's what it comes down to, is that TD did not know that that's what they were applying for.
Okay, so that's TD's out. If they said, yeah, perfect, no worries, we'll give you a mortgage, their response at the end of the day is, well, you didn't give us all the information. So.
Yeah, unfortunately. And you know what? I have to be honest, it's something I had no clue. I didn't realize that you couldn't get insurance for that.
How much was the purchase price, Andrea?
$174,000.
On a leased lot, wow.
Oh, these are beautiful modular homes, Neil. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Got attached garages. They're like a double wide. It's like 1,200 square feet, 3 bed, 2 bath. They're beautiful homes. Yeah.
So 5%, roughly $8,500. 20%, 34, if not 35,000. So they're short. You have to go conventional finance by 25 grand.
Well, at least, because when we asked TD if we were able to get the 20% together, they still said that they would still want to insure it because of, yeah. So I think like Sean basically said, he figured they would need 30 to 35% down for a bank to give them a mortgage.
And what about someone outside of the TD environment?
He talked with a mobile home specialist, and they could not get a solution either.
Yeah, because I'm like, well, if you got to 80% without the insurance requirement, and they stayed there a little longer, they could get to 10, and maybe the investor takes a small second back, depending again on what his potential is in there.
Yeah, we kind of explored all those things. The other fly in the ointment is the person that owns the park. So it's a 55 plus age restriction, Neil. That's what the age restriction is about. Is extremely rude and demeaning. And she can meet you once and say, if she doesn't take a liking to you, she literally says to your face, I'm banning you for life. I own this park and I decide who gets to move in here. So the park has a really bad reputation, and we didn't know that either. But in talking to a bunch of realtor friends, unfortunately, when the original owner passed, who was fabulous, the kids took over, and it is a nightmare to deal with them. They don't respond to messages. When they do respond, very rude. So, my rent-to-own folks said, we are not paying this lady $600 a month to be treated like this.
Maybe, maybe they're kind of lucky. They would be miserable there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Neil, I see your question, 30% to purchase on leased land. Would that include Indigenous? That's a question for Sean Impey. Sorry, I can't answer that because it's not Indigenous.
So Sean also explored credit unions. Oh, the insurer issue, eh? Jeez. Well, this is new for me too, Andrea. You didn't know about it, and I never see these in my practice, so I didn't know about that either. Yeah, this comes under the heading, oh, Barry, you've been at this 45 years. You must have seen or heard everything. Nope.
Well, you didn't
always new stuff,
right?
Always new stuff. There's always new stuff. So, Wayne, we can see you back in your lovely cabin there. If you can, if you can hear us well enough, have you got a big one, a big issue, a big win, a big something you want to talk about?
There is a cost to this nice backdrop, and that is that the internet is horrible here. Now the question is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, we're good then. I had a bunch of big ones, and I was struggling with it today, trying to figure out which one to use. And then I kind of settled on like my one big moment, and that was I was taking possession of my third agreement for sale, and I was meeting the seller at the house. She was finishing cleaning up. She was handing us like vacuum cleaners and stuff, and just like, here, take this, here, take this, here, take this. And she was moving away, and she started to cry, and she like asked if she could hug us, and she's crying and she's hugging, and she was so happy. And I was not expecting that. Actually, I was extremely uncomfortable because now everything was done and she was leaving. I thought it was going to be very uncomfortable taking the keys and her being like, you stole my house. And I didn't know what to say. Like I walked into that meeting like, because up until that point, like I really didn't, I'll be honest, I didn't think it was possible for it to be win-win. I always felt like, I don't want to say I always felt like I was taking, their house from them, but like I always felt like I was trying to convince them of it. And when she started crying and thanking us profusely and hugging us, it was in that moment that I realized that I had actually solved her problem. And it was big. It was big. It was, Gabby started crying. I didn't cry. I'm a crier, but Gabby cried. And like, it was just this really powerful moment that like, wow, we helped her, and we
put Gabby on camera. I wanted to corroborate that, Wayne.
What's that?
I wanted to corroborate that you didn't cry.
She's not here, so. But yeah, but we solved the problem, and it was amazing, and it was like in that moment that I realized that you can create win-wins. It is possible for you to solve someone's problem and to make it beneficial for you as well. And like I said, I'll admit, like up until that point, I wasn't 100% comfortable with the whole process, just in my internal beliefs. I felt like there was more that I could have done. I felt like I felt like I was taking advantage of someone by because I was getting way more than what they were getting. But it was at that point that I almost had like a paradigm shift, and I realized that I need to be looking at it differently and looking at it as I'm solving a problem, as opposed to calling as many people as possible and saying, will you do seller financing? Will you do agreement for sale? So it was a big moment for me. And I always remember moments like that. I like to attach them. So I always look back and like, that was the moment where that happened. So that was my one big moment.
That is a big one. That is a big one. And Wayne, I think that more folks than you felt the way you did, and maybe still feel the way you do until you had this big moment. I mean, we talk about and about win-win. We talk about helping. We talk about solving problems. We talk about not putting your own spin on why a seller will do something, and not trying to balance out what the seller's doing with what you would do or how you feel about it or what your circumstances would lead you to do if the shoe was on the other foot. And so that, folks, this is a really good one from Wayne, I think. I hope you don't have to go through X number of deals saying to yourself you're taking advantage of people or not believing in the process or that win-win really works. I'm not quite sure how you were looking at it, Wayne, so I don't want to put words or thoughts into your head before your big moment. But win-win, where you really are trying to solve somebody's problem, it's just so powerful. It is so powerful when people believe that you're trying to solve their problem. Firstly, they will open up and tell you anything and help you with everything. And then they will do what they think they need to do for them, what they need to do for themselves. And if that, it might bring you some huge advantage, but it's what the seller wants to do and what they will do, coming from them believing that you are a problem solver and that you're not trying to take advantage of them, and that you are playing for win-win. So just believing that that's the way the process works is sometimes hard to get your head around. I don't know if Neil and Andrea, did you ever experience that, especially when you were starting out before you understood the power of problem solving and win-win, or did you always believe it and go ahead with that in mind?
I think we're always helping solve people's problems. And when you take it from that perspective, we're just there to solve whatever the issue is. And I would say it's not uncommon to get a hug from somebody because they're so stressed out, and just the stress relief of having been done with the situation, they just, sometimes there's tears from them. And then sometimes there's hugs and such because, people just didn't know that this option existed. And so they're just so thankful to have a solution. Yeah.
And it's the solution that gets rid of that stress for them and solves their problem, which, for people who don't have the problem, especially, I don't want to lump it on engineers, logical, hard driving, numbers driven, emotionless analyzers always have a hard time with the kind of fuzzy aspect of creative real estate, with the win-win, the problem solving and what it can mean and what it can generate. They refuse to believe that people will do what we know they all do a lot. They do it a lot. What about you, Neil? Did you always believe in win-win, or did you have to kind of come to it a little bit?
No, I think we were very fortunate in that out of the chute, we understood that, people were looking for a solution and a benefit. And if we could solve a problem for them, I have a recollection of a deal that we did very, very early on. And the lady was just an absolute sweetheart of a lady, to the point where we're still friends today with her. She had lost her husband to cancer, and unfortunately, because he was an entrepreneur and had to declare bankruptcy at one point when the business failed, part of the bankruptcy proceedings was that the trustee said to him, you need to cancel your life insurance policy because it's an asset. Yeah, and you see where this is going. So bankruptcy, cancel, fatal, and she ends up now with the house and a widow, and she's stuck, right? Because she just can't, she knows that she can make the payments for a while, but she knew that she couldn't make them forever. And when we went and visited her, and this was very early on in her buying time, it was almost like Linda and I walked out, I went, uh-oh, because she said, I'm good. I absolutely trust in you. We don't need to get a realtor involved to do this for me. And she had the equity in the property where she could have sold it. And all of a sudden the pressure was on us now to deliver and get the house sold, which we eventually did. And then, interesting enough, full circle back to mobile homes, she ended up moving and downsizing and didn't think she could get it approved. And at the time we had a really strong connection at the credit union. He says, yeah, I can do that. And she's now in her place owning for, I got to think, darn near 10 years, when she thought she'd be a renter for the rest of her life. And, you know, and I found her a minivan, and it's just those things that are, it goes beyond, yeah, we made some money on the house, obviously. But it goes beyond that in our relationship with that. And you see that lots where people at first, you will get the, this is sketchy. What's going on? Right? What's the catch? What am I missing here? How's this scammy? But as you gain and build that trust component with people, they see that you have presented them a solution where no one else was able to prior to you.
And then because you're going into it from that perspective, and because she trusts you, it's, you know, you do what any of us would do, I think, to help anybody that we're in a relationship with. If there's something, you know, that would help them, like contact at the credit union or helping with a minivan. I mean, those are things that were within your bailiwick to do, and that she couldn't do anything about. So you just go and do it. You just make the call, you do something about the van, you set them up, and it's just part of carrying on. And it's part of the wider, you know, there's the nugget of the deal, and then there's the relationship that kind of grows from that, and then it kind of pops out a little bit more. And that's why win-win and problem solving is so important. It's from the heart. You're trying to do your best. People get that. They understand. You know, most people have a BS meter, and they can usually tell if you're trying to take advantage of them. So and people can tell when you're not. So that's why this way of going at it, this looking to help, the problem solving, the never taking advantage. That's why it's so powerful. That's why, I mean, I come back to Vanessa Kirshner and the deal where, I mean, I don't even, it was well over $100,000 worth of equity that she got in a house, and she asked her seller why she was dealing with Vanessa. She goes, Vanessa, I had lots of calls from lots of people who wanted my house, and they were all trying to screw me. Every one of them. You were the only one who I thought was honest and looking out for me. And Vanessa did well over $100,000 in equity in that home, from a completely eyes wide open seller who just wanted to deal with Vanessa. So, I mean, good things happen. Good things happen. Now, where's Tammy's question? Tammy says, what do you see for anticipated opportunities and strategies coming up during and after COVID? Regulations, daily, monthly, new that you might not have seen, and what to watch out for. All right, who's got a comment on that? Anybody? What's coming up? Neil.
We took possession of a house 2 weeks ago from a fellow who had just finished his deferral period, and his tenants had dumped the house on him, and Midnight moved back in July. And again, we didn't spend a lot of time asking him why he hadn't re-rented it, why the utilities had been shut off for 3 months and it was about to freeze the house. We just knew where we were today, and that likely he didn't, because the house was still full of their junk and needed $10,000 to $15,000 worth of renovations to make it rent ready again. And despite that, he had a brother who was more than willing to help him here and keep stuff on. But the brother said, I'm not going to be your property manager. He was making calls, and he agreed, same thing. We took over his payments. The house should be ready next week. And so to answer the question, I think everyone who has a house buying, a We Buy Houses campaign out there has seen that the phones have been quiet for the last literally 6, if not 7 months now, because things like CERB and deferments created just a pause for everyone in the process where they could actually sit and either try and figure out how to find a solution or sit and remain frozen. And as their CERB and deferment periods are ending, we are now seeing a few more calls starting to roll in. So I don't know if that's the question you had, Tammy, but I think if you're running a campaign, you're going to see a few more inquiries rolling in as a result of programs finishing, transitioning, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so those deferral programs are, I think that is going to provoke some people wanting and having to get rid of property. Not sure where the government's going with new relief programs. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there. What do you think, Andrea? Seen anything?
Yeah, I agree. So on your Facebook, I did my video recently about the smell of money and what it looks like. And similar situation. So a lady who's already working 2 jobs, tenant comes in and in her opinion has destroyed it. And I say, you know, to me, it needs flooring and paint and a couple of things. But when you don't have the money to do it, it seems like a super huge deal. And it was very dated as well. I mean, when she lived in it herself as a single mom, you know, to her it was beautiful. And I'm sure it was in a much better shape. But, you know, when somebody's done, they're just done. And, you know, we were able to get it for a very good price, thanks to Nathan Koronik's negotiating skills. It was his deal, but he wholesaled it to me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can make this work, because we're buying it for 2/3 of the value on the resale market. So, you know, we're going to put about $20,000 of renovations in, qualify for a mortgage, and get that investor's money back out again. So then we'll have no money left in the deal. And isn't that a fantastic place to be, and to have a better interest rate? Because she did have a bit of a higher interest rate. So it doesn't cash flow on an agreement for sale, but we're doing the agreement for sale for 3 to 4 months so we can get the renovations done and then get it refinanced. So it's going to solve her problem, you know, in 3 to 4 months as well, because it'll free up some credit for her as well. So I think, you know, it's kind of funny. She said to me, would you mind if I come and see it after you're done renovating? I just need to see what it could have been. And so I said, oh, absolutely. She said, is that strange to ask? And I said, no, it's all good, because you have to consider she had memories there. That's where she went to when she needed a place. It was what was affordable for her to purchase as a single mom with young kids at the time. And so there's an emotional attachment to it. So, you know, although she doesn't have the bandwidth to do the renovations, she's quite excited for us to do them and to see what it will look like at the end of the day.
Did she give you a big hug right at the end of all that?
No, she didn't, but that's okay.
Well, she might have. It sounded like there was a hug coming there. It's
COVID times.
After the renovations, I don't know.
Wayne, what about you? You got any thoughts about where the heck we're going here in the middle of COVID, and when we do get one of those, everybody's up in the vaccine ante. I've got a 90%. Oh yeah, I've got a 94.5. Oh yeah, we finished our last part of it. And we're up to 95. So what do you see?
Well, I just want to start off by saying that, like, I think it's very common for what Andrea said about, like, the previous seller wanting to come and see the finished product after the fact. I've had that happen to us a couple times, where they just kind of mosey in. They're like, you know what I mean? Because like she said, that was their home. That was, you know, they loved this. They always wanted to renovate it, right? So I think that's really cool. And like I said, we've had that happen a couple times. I agree with Neil and Andrea, and that's just, with all things considered, with the deferrals and the CERB, I think that all of the normal circumstances that we normally solve, or all the normal problems that we're typically solving, which is divorces, job loss, relocations, income changes, and tired landlords, it's all amplified by this, right? There's a lot more tired landlords right now because they're sick and tired of their tenants not being able to pay because they don't have jobs. There's a lot of people dealing with tenants who are, now they're on CERB. They're not on they're on EI. They're not on their regular salary anymore. So they're just trying to scrape by and, get as much rent together as possible. So I feel like there's a lot more tired landlords. I feel like there is a lot more homeowners who maybe they were getting much better hours before and now they're not getting those hours. A lot of people buy houses that are not within their affordability and they base it off of overtime and stuff like that. So I think it's just all amplified. I think the opportunities have always been there, but there's just significantly more based on the circumstances now. So it's not, I don't like to look at it as opportunities. Again, I kind of like to look at it, my perspective now is just more problems that we can solve and more win-wins that we can create.
Let's get to Drew's question. And then we've got newbie Facebook user newbie has a question. Drew says, what's everyone's favorite method of finding leads? So, we talk about leads all the time. You got to find deals to talk about. And we do talk about this a lot. Wayne, you were last. Let's have you be first. What's your favorite way of finding leads?
My favorite problem to solve, I guess, is the homeowner that needs to relocate, is the homeowner that can't sell. I like newly built properties, so that's typically the way that I like to find it. So private sellers who can't sell because they don't have any equity, low equity, no equity situations. And I like I said, I typically just go phone numbers on the, that are in the window, or Purple Bricks or Kijiji. That's my favorite.
All right. So you look for information from any of those places that you just said for the kinds of properties you want. You've talked about that before. It's relatively newer properties where you are pretty sure you know exactly what's going on with the person who's looking to sell. So that's how you find your leads. Andrea, what about you?
So I don't advertise, people come to me. So it's mostly realtors and people who know about me that bring me deals.
And that folks, Andrea is a poster girl for what happens when you're in this business for a while, when you do what you say you're going to do, when you get to be known as a problem solver, where you network and where realtors and mortgage brokers and lawyers, because you've been in the game for a while. That works for Andrea because she has been in the game and she's a reliable problem-solving person who people know they can count on. But that didn't happen when she just decided she was moving to Red Deer from the coast and going to be a real estate person. You build up to that, but you can build up to that. And now Andrea doesn't have to advertise. Neil, what about you? Where do you find your deals? How do you find those leads?
For us, Barry, the majority of our leads are coming in through, quite frankly, our website. So we have our airdriehouseBuyers.ca site. We finally fixed the submission form, which was kind of embarrassing, but again, we're moving forward. And again, there is an advantage, I will say, to sometimes being an older dog, in that our site ranks organically. So if you were to Google "sell my house Airdrie," we rank in the top. We'll be on page 1 for sure. There's definitely the advertised people. I know that a friend of mine who we went to your course when it was in Red Deer, Dean, he short-circuited that by running a very well-crafted and carefully targeted Google campaign to rank him when people were using whatever the keywords for. And so, to answer Drew's question, you don't have to be organic like we are. We're just fortunate that that we've gotten there over time. But Dean's whole point was to start out and focus his marketing on Google and short circuit that timing where it takes for your site. And the effect of the campaign was that he is now moving towards being organically ranked, and therefore he can run down his marketing budget. So a short version of, instead of picking up the phone and cold calling people, we're like Andrea, they find us one way or the other. We run Facebook ads, we run Marketplace, I guess, which is Facebook. I actually had a Virage sale reply just this week that I haven't had in months. Like, I've had that ad there for a long time. And we run a Kijiji ad, which again, sometimes you see something on it, sometimes you don't. There is no one magic bullet. I think the best answer is to dangle multiple lures in the water, so to speak, if you're using the fishing analogy. I mean, we ran bandit signs for years. We haven't run, and a bandit sign, sorry for the folks who don't know, is about, I'm off camera, 12 by 12-ish coroplast sign that you either zip tie to a signpost or a utility pole, or put them in stakes in the ground. And they're called bandit signs because a lot of times you have to watch your local city bylaw. And again, we've touched on that in your course, Barry. You put them out on a Friday night, and you take them out on Sunday evening, and bylaw works Monday to Friday. So it's kind of like speeding, right? It's not illegal if you don't get caught.
Oh my goodness. So folks, so there you go. We asked 3 people how they get their leads, and we got 3 really completely different answers. So you got to dangle those lures. You got to try stuff. You got to figure out what works for you, and find stuff that works. There is something that will work for everyone. All right, let's go to Facebook. Let's go to our newbies question. Here it is. It says, what I can't understand about AFS is how you cash flow the home once you have it under contract. Seems like most of the homes would need a suite in order to cash flow, and I can't imagine that most people would need to sell their house via AFS if they had an income suite. Okay, who wants to take a shot at that?
Are we doing the same one in, one out, or is Andrea going to go first this time?
Andrea, you do it.
I can go first. So that's a good question. So I always make sure that if I'm doing an agreement for sale, that I can cash flow the property. So I guess it all depends where you live. So here in Red Deer, if the house that I'm buying and the mortgage details are good enough, if somebody, put 20% down and has had some pay down over time, I can still, at least break even, or maybe $100 cash flow on a single family house. My latest purchase is a townhouse that's condoized, and there's condo fees, but I can still make it cash flow just because it's where I live and what the purchase prices are and the mortgages that we have on them. So I guess my answer is it depends.
It depends. Neil, do you have an add-on there?
There will be a threshold at which there's a property that we just unfortunately say to the homeowner, I'm sorry, we like everything about the deal except for the fact that you have a $2,600 mortgage payment, and the most I can generate in rent is $1,600. And I've actually had one of those, and I have no idea how he had a $2,600 payment. By the way, we couldn't figure it out, but it was what it was. But I will also say this, that if it's a personal, what's the word I'm looking for? Comfort level, I guess. In that, for us, if the property cash flows as a straight rental, done, buying it, taking it, because we know that that's our backup plan. So again, we talk about in agreement for sale or creative buying, that multiple exits. It's easy to buy a property, but how are we going to? What are the best ways that we're going to move this property back out the door? And sometimes you don't move it back out because you're going to roll it into your buy and hold portfolio. But if you're planning on moving the property along, then for us, that's that creative combinations coming around again, where we look at it as not just a rental, but then we're going to put it out on rent to own, and then people are paying us market rent plus their option credit monthly, and that can turn a property that is negative cash flow into positive break even, but usually positive type cash flow. And so I know that if on paper it's underwater by $100 or $200, but it looks like a fairly decent candidate to get a rent-owned family in there, we're going to move forward with the property. Again, it's a personal decision how much negative cash flow is acceptable. If you were getting, I'll throw a number out there, $30,000 or $50,000 of free equity in a property and nothing up front, and the property was negative cash flow by $200 or $300 a month, I would submit to some people that, $200 times 12 is $2,400 per year that you're injecting into it to cash flow, to bring the cash flow to neutral. But by the same token, you bought that house at zero down. So you're kind of paying your down payment. A typical traditional rental property is 20% down. And to get to your 20%, how long would it take you at $200 a month to accumulate a down payment? But in the meantime, you're getting all that mortgage pay down in that time. So some of those deals, negative cash flow, even if you can't bring it positive, still have reasons to proceed forward, as long as you're not picking up 10, 15, 20 of those that are all negative 500, because that becomes a reality of cash in the till, cash out of the till as a business, right? But again, when we have a portfolio that does cash flow overall positively, I'll take one on if I know that the long term makes sense for us.
So the newbie, calling you newbie, but that's what it is, newbie. So every AFS deal, just because there's one offered to you, that every AFS deal doesn't work. You need to analyze. They need to work from your perspective as an investor, and there are lots of different perspectives that you can apply to an AFS deal. But they've got whatever strategy or exit you think you're going to apply to it. Other questions? Jared says, when wholesaling, how creative can one get in negotiating the deal, or is that something better left for the investor you're planning on assigning to? How creative can you get in negotiating the deal? Well, when you're wholesaling, you're looking to buy a property under value so that you can in turn sell your contract to someone else who wants to take advantage of the undervalue and make some money in the process. You can always, I'm not sure what you mean there, Jared. You can leave money on the table for the ultimate investor that you're assigning to. You have to do that. So not sure if I'm answering that question. Neil? Wayne?
I think what he's asking, is how creative can one get negotiating deal? Like how creative can you get in preparing this deal for your target assignee, right? I think maybe if you were to put together like an agreement for sale deal, have it under contract with the seller financing schedule. How creative can you get in that respect?
I read it the same way, Wayne. And yeah, because I said, obviously in a straight wholesale deal, the word wholesale implies that you're buying it at a price low enough that you can turn around and move that deal off to the ultimate buyer and keep something in between. But if you get the creative side of it, Jared, does this make sense that if you have negotiated a price, say you have a $300,000 property that you've negotiated to buy it for $220, and you're going to assign it at $250 and pick up $30,000 in the transaction. If you were able to pick up an agreement for sale on top of just a normal cash price purchase on a wholesale, as a wholesaler, now you have the ability to market that deal out to potential buyers with multiple options, going, hey, listen, you could buy this place at $250 straight cash, or if you're planning to do a reno and flip, or a reno refi, there's some agreement for sale payments built into that right now. And it's just that the more options that you can present to your wholesale crowd, the more opportunity you maybe have to get the deal gone, if that makes sense.
Okay, that does make good sense.
We have a property now, Barry, that we just put up on MLS last week, just trying to catch some of this late fall froth in the market right now. And I asked our realtor just to add about 5 words to the listing, and it says RTO and VTB options. Seller is open to RTO and VTB options, and we've been getting a few calls. And of course, the question that comes is they say, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And when you have a realtor who's versed in them, they want to know what you're thinking, and we say, well, we're open. So what are you thinking? And so the first one that's come back that's reasonable on that had said, well, they would have a hefty portion down and want you to carry the finance. And let's talk.
Let's talk. Hefty portion down is always good words. Wayne.
Hefty good.
I just want to add a little more on to Jared's question, and that is, you know, Neil had given an example of a large spread of $80,000 between, you know, the purchase price and the actual value, so the equity there. But there's also the possibility of putting together a larger, longer agreement for sale with not as much equity. And in that scenario, let's just go super simple, where you're buying it for market value, or you're buying it for exactly what they owe, but you've added in a 10-year agreement for sale with zero money down. You would look at that as, okay, how much is this investor potentially going to make off of this? They're over 10 years, they're going to make $100,000 or $80,000. At that point, you would establish what you believe the assignment value would be. So, you know, you as the investor would look at this and be like, okay, zero money down deal, I'm going to make $100,000. What's this worth? So I would say, hey, $5,000, $10,000 assignment to me, I'll give you this deal. And you're looking at it like, wow, $10,000, I can make 100, and they carry the financing. Pretty decent. So there's in those scenarios, you really get to establish the assignment fee based on the value of the deal, as opposed to the spread of equity between, you know, the purchase price and the actual market value.
Good other factor to mention. Yeah, the value. All right. What other questions do we have? We're up on the 6 o'clock mark, but if we got some more questions, how about Wayne? How did you get your wife on board with all these creative and scary strategies?
Wonder who that was.
Yeah.
A club, and I dragged her.
It's a very important comment. Question.
It is very important, and whether you're trying to convince your wife or whether you're trying to convince yourself, it is all very scary, and the uncertainty of it can be a little daunting. But we just got our feet wet. We jumped in. You know, as you get more and more exposed to it, you begin to get more and more comfortable because you're not so uncertain anymore. You're more familiar with the process. You call it the one damn deal, right? Once you get that one damn deal, everything gets easier. So once I had to do a lot of the legwork, I had to be the one, you know, taking charge in that first one. But once we got that deal and that money was in our hands, it was an assignment. It was an assignment. Gabby was more comfortable. And then as we got more and more comfortable with it and in the process and how to take care of all the steps along the way, she got really comfortable with it, and we haven't looked back since.
Well, that's that you were both interested at the beginning, even though you might have led till Gabby got a bit more comfortable with it. But folks, really, it's hard to be in real estate or do creative deals if your spouse or your partner hates the idea or is not on board. That'll be miserable for you. So keep that in mind as you move forward. It's tough to do it if your partner hates it or doesn't want to come along with you.
Mm-hmm.
Irina says, can you summarize how you have to take over the mortgage payments? How to make it happen as a tenant from the tired landlord? Not quite sure what to say to Irina. Who wants to try that?
I think I can jump in on that one.
Okay.
Irina, I would say the first question to ask the landlord, and maybe you've already established it, is how tired are they? Are they interested in selling? Do they want to just, are they tired of the key word I think that everyone hears for years? I'm tired of tenants and toilets, right? So if they're tired of tenants and toilets, you can establish that regardless of you're the tenant or it's a property that you don't live in. I think that the process would be reasonably similar. That says, if you go back and flip in the 372-page manual, you'll see the sheet on information gathering. That's here's what we want to find out. You know, what does the place need? Well, if you're living there, you know that for repairs. But what you want to know, obviously, is what are they thinking? in terms of price, how did they come up with that price, and what is the debt situation? So, right, the standard, I call it the Andrea questions, even though we all ask those questions. But
Hold
it's
on there,
knowing-
Neil. Just speaking of Andrea, I know Andrea has a previous commitment that kind of was starting at 6 o'clock, and she's hung in here till now. So Andrea, I know you got to head out. So we always love your smiling face. Thanks for pitching in and helping out. And if you got to go, I know you got to go. So
Yes, thanks very much for having
Great.
me. I
Bye,
look forward to doing it
Andrea.
again.
all right, Neil, back to you.
So yeah, it's about determining what is the property, what does it need for repairs, which is fairly standard as an investor when you're analyzing, but then to make it an agreement for sale to look at what is the underlying debt. So how much is owed, what's the rate, when does it mature, what are the payments, are they current on the payments, what are the property taxes, if it's a condo, what are the condo fees, and then looking at that to say, can you structure a deal with them that says, if I were to buy your place, and again, she just left, but the queen of, I buy properties in one of two ways. One is we pay all cash, and the other one is we'll take over your payments and cash you out at a later date. And that certain things you're going to make your own when you're talking to sellers, but certain key phrases are verbatim. You need to say them word for word, and we will take over your payments and cash you out at a later date. And just the silence part of negotiation and that is one of the hardest things as human beings. We hate silence. We got to fill it, but just sit and wait for the response.
Okay, that's a good answer.
And that's a bit of a start for your arena. If you have questions about a specific deal, once you get that information, send them to Barry and Donna, send them to Wayne, send them to Andrea. Don't send them to me. I'm kidding. Send them to me. We'll all look at the numbers, and anyone who's on this group, we're always happy to help you analyze and look and say, deal or no deal. Who knows? You may end up getting interviewed on a Monday night on deal or no deal. But certainly it's part of that learning, and we just do that, right? We don't take your deal. We don't want your deal. We just, if we can help you get that first damn deal, as they say with Barry, right?
Great.
We all
So
started
important.
somewhere, and I remember calling people going, I was chatting with Tammy Saunders last week, and I actually made a call to a guy because I noticed he had a Kijiji ad for a house for sale, and he had the same house on the for rent. I'm like, I'm going to call this guy, and I'm like, I can't remember how to cold call because it's been so long. So I was like, fumbling. So yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. Okay, we got coming to the end of our questions here. Hey guys, I plan on buying a property this coming year using an AFS, more specifically a VTB, and I was wondering what are some things to consider using that method, as well as things to consider with COVID-19. Well, it's good that that's a nice, tight, specific question that isn't too broad. I guess I don't know what to say about that. If you're using an AFS, that's not really a VTB. And the differences between using an AFS versus a VTB, there's a whole bunch of things to talk about in there. And COVID is a whole other issue. So I'm having trouble kind of digging down to the nugget of what I would answer to that question.
I'd agree. I think we need a little. Sorry, Wayne, go ahead.
I've got a couple points, but I'll let you finish.
Good.
Obviously, VTB in most cases is much better than an agreement for sale. Having your name on title is always much more powerful. Obviously, Barry had mentioned that there is significant differences between the two, which we don't really have the time to go through. But I will say, in regards to things to consider with COVID-19, one thing that I learned is that if you have an agreement for sale, let's say you already have an agreement for sale, and you have the option to renew with your seller, renewals are a little tricky these days. And depending on the seller that you're dealing with and the seller's problem that you were solving, if they were falling a little behind, or maybe they had some credit card debts or something like that, you need to be conscious and you need to be aware of their situation during the term of the agreement for sale. And I'll use an example. One of my sellers, she wasn't taking care of her credit. Her credit was fantastic when we signed the deal years ago, but she wasn't taking care of it. She wasn't working because of COVID now. She built up a little bit of debt. And then her renewal came this past summer. And because of that, they're, for lack of better terms, they're kind of, the mortgage companies are trimming the fat on all of the bad mortgages. And when renewal time comes up, they're not getting the same offer that they had before. We actually were offered a significantly higher interest rate, which in the industry, again, for lack of better words, is a bit of an FU offer, like I want to renew with you. During COVID, again, if you already have an agreement for sale, I'd be very cautious and watching with your sellers to make sure that, you know, if you're solving a desperate problem, you might want to maybe focus on not desperate sellers around this time. That's just been my experience. Did I explain that?
All right. I guess I could make one comment to our Facebook user. Just not sure from that question whether or not you've done what all of us need to do, which is really nail down your education. So if you're really clear on what an agreement for sale is versus a BTB, you know, that's great. But if you haven't done the deep dive into all of the technicalities of how an AFS works, you really should consider buying one of our home study kits. Not that expensive to buy, and it's really worth every penny. Is when you do your first damn deal, you'll pay for it, and you need that education if you're going to go out and enter into the AFS market. So I'll throw that out there. It's everybody's choice about how they get their education, but you got to have that education, folks. And on that note, I think Wayne, have we come to the end of our questions?
Yeah.
So,
well, one last one. I haven't read it, but
I was wondering what strategy is best used if you want to buy a fourplex using one of these strategies. If you want to do it, you want to do a low or no money down deal. Well,
we did a multifamily investor spotlight just recently with Save me. He might be watching.
David, was it David Coughlin?
David, I know it's David. I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, David Coughlin.
Coughlin, that's right.
Yes, David Coughlin. So you can go back. I think those interviews, the one with David Coughlin was, I think that was a investor spotlight. So that would have been a Monday investor spotlight. So you can go back and listen to that one. So that's a really interesting way that David got a multi-family property or a multi-unit property for very little money down. And also, I think we did an investor spotlight with your pal Dean, didn't we, Neil? Didn't we do a special one with him, Dean Mante?
I don't know if this was multifamily,
but I was just going to say, we had, you know, when we talked about marketing, Drew was asking about marketing, how you lead, and you talked about Dean and how he did stuff, which was quite interesting to hear about how he, you know, just did a really targeted campaign. So that was also an investor spotlight. So anybody who wants to listen or hear about leads, go back and listen to Dean's investor spotlight.
Yeah, if you're new to this group, there are some really, really good past videos that are great education. And, you know, yeah, Netflix is cool, but maybe split 20% of your Netflix time out for self-education and to further your financial future. Hang around in this group for those people who are new. If you're really new, by all means, I had someone who asked that question that's saying, should I take the self-study kit or wait? And the answer is absolutely get in the self-study, because as Tammy had mentioned earlier, we see opportunities coming. And if you're versed enough to take advantage of them as they come up, as opposed to, you know, waiting when you may not be able to recognize it, now is definitely the time to get your education, get your tools in your belt, get them sharpened, get used to using them. And you will find that not every single person you're going to talk to is going to say yes to a creative type deal. So fourplex, if I'm trying to get in with very little down and it's a property that isn't hot, where it's just going to sell conventionally, remember the sellers want conventional, then the second choice is to make it worth their while, maybe a vendor take back so that they can spread their capital gain over a couple of years, right? So that's a strategy that I've seen work well, and that way you don't need a lot of money down. But then you come in behind the major banks, so you got to get you have to be able to get financed to get that strategy to work. And obviously, if it isn't, then you're looking at trying to create an agreement for sale.
All right, folks, a couple more questions, a short one and a longer one. What is a VTB? A VTB is a vendor take-back, VTB, vendor take-back. And the other word on the end of that is mortgage, vendor take-back mortgage. That's when you're buying and a seller agrees to be your bank for a part of the purchase price. A little different from an AFS because title transfers into your name instead of the AFS where title remains in the seller's name. But it's still seller financing, and some sellers are open to the notion of being your bank. So vendor take back is a VTB. Wayne, let's pop up this last question that says, if the person only has a short time remaining on the mortgage, has fallen behind on payments, is this an automatic no-go because the lender won't renew? That's a great question. If they have a couple of years left prior to renewal, it gives you time to repair their payment history with the bank. But how many on-time payments do you need? I don't think there are specific answers to those questions. It's certainly a red flag you got to deal with if they have a short time left and they're behind, because that's what kind of what Wayne ran into. Wayne, what do you think on this one? You've had kind of personal experience.
Just from my personal experience, I would be cautious right now, just because of the way things are with lenders, and they're trying to cover and mitigate their risk just like we are, right? Those deferrals probably did not help business. So you can't really ask your seller to get confirmation that they're going to be able to renew. So I would be cautious. I would try, and me personally, I would not deal with anyone who's missing any payments. Missing a mortgage payment is bad. And I'm sure if Sean's here, he's gonna put a thumbs up. Because missing a mortgage payment is not good on your credits. So it's a big blip when they go for renewal, and you as an investor, you're investing, or you're banking on that renewal being the same low interest rate. And if that interest rate goes up, that means your profit goes down, your payments go up, so it doesn't cash flow anymore. It's extremely risky. And you had said that if they have a couple more years left prior to renewal, it gives you some time for there to repair. Maybe, but again, it's on their record that they have a missed mortgage payment. It's not good. And I won't do an agreement for sale for less than 4 or 5 years. So, yeah, I would personally stay away from it, just from my experience.
No way to nail it down. That's the trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the easiest answer on that question is it depends, because we have seen both ends of that spectrum in our dealings with sellers. We actually did an AFS agreement with a fellow who was at maturity and delinquent 3 payments. And we looked at the deal and said, okay, and in this particular case, it was Bridgewater Bank. Did you know that AMA here in Alberta has a bank called Bridgewater Bank? They do.
Oh.
And they will renew you if they said, you bring it current, we'll send you the renewal offer. I'm like, can I get that in writing? And they absolutely sent it in writing. And they sent it over, and they offered him a renewal, and he was already at a higher interest rate. So I would submit that Bridgewater is a B lender to begin with, but his rate actually came down by a percentage point from where it was. It was crazy. And it just reminded me that his renewal's due this month. I better find out what's happening so it doesn't go to an open one. By the same token, we had one at the far end of the scale. If you're going to throw the bouquets to people like Bridgewater who want to let their people succeed and don't want to foreclose, you got to go to the other end to like a CMLS, where these people had fallen behind. They had both lost their jobs. They got behind in payments, but they got back and current on payments for more than a year. and they got the, as Wayne said, the very nice PFO letter from the bank saying non-renewal, notice of non-renewal. And what really ground my gears on that one was that the 1-800 folks were saying, yep, don't worry, we're going to send this to you. You guys are all good. It's all great. And with 45 days to go to renewal, they sent them the letter. And these people were like, stuck. What do we do? So we bought that property. So back to the original question poser, maybe one way to mitigate knowing whether you're going to get that, because you don't always know, is to have a plan B. And in that case, our plan B was, which became our plan A quite early once we realized there was no renewal, is we were planning to finance it directly on our own. We got investor money involved and ended up financing it. So, you know, if you have a plan B for non-renewal, but you want to have that notice so that you can execute your plan B within a reasonable period of time.
Right.
So for us, we won't turn away the deal, but we'll definitely make sure that where are we at? How do we make this work?
All right, everyone. Well, we're 24 minutes past what I'd like to commit people to, which is an hour's worth of time. So thanks, Wayne, thanks Neil, and thanks to Andrea who had to go for coming on and helping out with the one, the big issue, the big win, the big whatever. So I thought that was pretty informative. And then for all your great answers to the questions, and thanks everybody who came on. There's been some excellent questions.
Really
I mean, it's great. It's just great listening to the responses, and I personally find it very helpful to hear these questions and then hear the answers and to pitch in. So that's tonight's Live at 5.
I'm going to put this out here. I know that I've had a couple conversations with Donna about a next level of this course. So I'm going to just say to people, unprompted, unscripted at my end, saying, if you think that there's an opportunity for a next level of learning with the McGuires, supported by Focus Team, put it in the comments. And what does that look like? And you're thinking, you know, sometimes maybe you ask for opinions and you can't please everyone, but I believe that these videos and sessions, if they had existed when we were starting, would have been invaluable. But what really got us going was be able to do that next level of intensive, repetitive training at that next level of discussion. And again, without naming names, if you're in the real estate investor world, you know there are groups that have varying levels of participation. So, sorry, Donna.
She's giggling in the background, Neil.
It's out there.
All right. That's stirring giggle, yeah. Well, thanks for saying that. You know, there's lots to be learned, and there's always another level, and maybe that's a good idea. So yeah, folks, if you're interested, stick it in the comments. Let's have a chat about it, and we'll see if that idea bears fruit down the road. All right, everyone. I'll sign off.
Have a
Thanks
good night,
to
guys.
everyone who showed up. All right.
Keep
Good
chatting
evening,
with
everyone.
sellers.